She wore her Yale hoodie like armor. Not to brag, just to belong. But when two officers corner her outside a suburban bookstore, their smirks say it all. Yale? Not you. They didn't ask her name. They didn't know who she was. But when her father's car pulls up and the president of Yale University steps out, the conversation shifts. And so does the power. The rain came down soft, just enough to blur the edges of the world. Tiana Brooks stood under the awning of Whitmore Books, fingers wrapped around a damp paper bag, earbuds in, but the music off. Her Yale hoodie, deep navy with bold white letters across the front, clung to her shoulders in the mist. It wasn't new. The cuffs were frayed, the hem a little stretched, but it was hers. A gift from her dad after she aced her chemistry final. A promise more than a prize. She checked her phone. 3:42. Her dad was never late. A cruiser rolled by once, then again. Slower the second time. She felt the shift in the air before the doors opened. Two officers stepped out, one older, bulkier, with a chew in his cheek and a resting smirk. The other was younger, still learning how to stand like he owned the street. "You lost, sweetheart?" the older one asked, already walking toward her. Tiana paused, pulled one earbud out. "No, sir. Just waiting on my ride." The younger officer glanced at her hoodie, squinting like it didn't compute. "Yale?" he said, dragging the word out. "You got a sibling that goes there or something?" She didn't answer right away. She knew that tone, knew what he meant. "I plan to," she said quietly. The older cop chuckled, mean around the edges. "Sure you do. Lot of kids play dress-up." Tiana straightened just slightly. "My dad works there." That made them pause, but not soften. The younger one stepped a little closer, peering at the bag in her hand like it might hold something sharp. "Can we see some ID?" She blinked. "For waiting outside a bookstore." He shrugged. "Protocol. You don't look local. This isn't really a hangout spot." Tiana reached into her pocket slowly, deliberately, handed over her school ID from Madison Prep, laminated and slightly worn. The older officer snorted. "Fancy school? Must be nice." Neither of them handed the ID back right away. "I'm not causing trouble," she said, even. "I just bought a book. I'm waiting for my dad." The silence that followed was heavy with decision, like they were flipping a coin only they could see. "Mind if we ask what's in the bag?" the older one said, already reaching. Tiana stepped back half an inch. "It's a book. Mind if we check?" She didn't answer, just held the bag out, her fingers trembling now, but only slightly. The younger officer peeked inside. Hardcover. Their eyes were watching God. He frowned, like the title offended him. The radio on the older cop's shoulder crackled. He ignored it. And then, just faintly, Tiana heard the smooth roll of tires behind her. A familiar engine hum. A door clicked open. She didn't turn. She didn't need to. Because she knew who had arrived, and everything was about to change. The drizzle had turned to mist now, clinging to the windows, softening the scene, but not the tension. Tiana stood still, the bag still in her hand, the book still unopened. Her hoodie, damp and dark, seemed to glow against the pale sidewalk like a challenge someone had dared her to wear. "So," the older officer said, still holding her ID like it was a forged passport, "you're telling us this belongs to you? The hoodie? The book? All of it?" Tiana didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." The younger one paced a slow semicircle behind her, like he was sizing up more than her answer. "It's just, we've had a few reports lately. Kids coming into these neighborhoods, trying doors, snatching packages. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "I'm not from here," she said, calm but not small. "But I didn't come here for that. I came for a book. I'm waiting on my dad." The older cop raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Sure. And he works at Yale, right?" She nodded once. "He's the university president." The younger one scoffed under his breath, not even trying to hide it. "Right. And I'm the Pope." Their chuckles didn't echo, they just hung there, mean and empty. Look, the older officer said, stepping closer. You know lying to an officer is a crime, right? I'm not lying. Because if this hoodie's stolen, it's not. And you're out here casing the place. I'm not. The younger one tapped the mic on his shoulder. Dispatch, this is Unit 47, requesting another unit for possible questioning. Minor, female, non-compliant. Tiana blinked. I am not non-compliant. I'm standing here. Yeah, with a story that doesn't make sense, the older one said, circling again. Yale doesn't hand out sweatshirts like candy, and you don't look like someone they'd recruit. That one landed harder than the rest. Not loud, just sharp. She didn't look down. Didn't break her stance. Her fingers curled tighter around the bag. I work hard, she said, steady. I earned this hoodie. Just like I earned a place at Madison Prep. Just like I'll earn my way into Yale. The older officer snorted. Ambitious. Unrealistic, the younger one added. And still, she stood. One circle, one smirk, one more radio check. It wasn't about the hoodie anymore. It never was. It was about reminding her who they thought she was. The rain picked up again. Tiny pinpricks on pavement. Then, from the street behind them, a second car pulled up. Sleek, black, familiar. Tiana didn't smile, didn't move. She just exhaled, once, and waited. Because when power walks onto the scene, it doesn't need to announce itself. It just arrives. It started with one passerby, then two. A man with a dog paused, leash slack in his hand. A woman in running shoes slowed to a stop across the street. The kind of neighborhood where people weren't used to drama unless it came in headlines or on a screen. But now it was unfolding on their sidewalk, in front of their bookstore, and at the center stood a teenage girl in a Yale hoodie, surrounded by uniforms that didn't look like protection anymore. The older officer lowered his voice, but the words still carried. You sure you don't want to tell us the truth before this gets more complicated? Tiana didn't move. I already did. I'm waiting for my dad. A woman across the street raised her phone, camera pointed discreetly over her coat sleeve. Her lips pressed into a flat line, eyes locked on the scene. No words. Just a quiet record. The younger officer glanced up, noticed her, his jaw tensed. Ma'am, there's no need to film. She didn't respond, because she knew better. Tiana stayed rooted. The drizzle now slicked her curls to her forehead. Her backpack sagged slightly, heavy with the weight of being doubted. But her voice never cracked. I've told you, I go to Madison Prep. I came here to buy a book. My dad is picking me up. The older cop's smirk had faded. His eyes scanned the small crowd now forming, a couple by a parked SUV, an elderly man stepping out of the pharmacy next door. The moment was shifting. Public. Recorded. You got anything else in that bag? The younger one asked again, this time more clipped. No, Tiana said. Just a book, that's all. The woman with the phone zoomed in slowly. The officers looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Something about optics, about control. Tiana felt it. The tilt in their tone. The pressure of being surrounded without ever being touched. She repeated it again, softer this time, like she was speaking through a pane of glass. I'm waiting for my dad. She might have said it 5 times by now. 10. Each one a reminder she didn't owe them more than the truth she'd already given. But they weren't hearing her. Not really. Because they didn't see a daughter, or a scholar, or a kid clutching their eyes were watching God like it meant something. They saw a contradiction. Yale hoodie, black girl, quiet defiance. And that was enough to scare them. The older officer shifted, suddenly uncomfortable in his stance. Not because he was rethinking the situation, but because people were watching him think. The silence between them pulsed. Then, tires rolled against wet pavement. Again. A second car door opened. Not rushed, not frantic, just certain. And for the first time, the officers turned, unsure of who they were about to meet. The black sedan eased to a stop along the curb like it had done it 100 times before. Quiet, precise, without urgency. The kind of arrival that didn't need flashing lights to be noticed. Doors unlocked with a soft click. Then silence. The older officer turned first, brows furrowed, hands shifting to his belt. The younger one straightened his posture like he'd suddenly remembered he was being watched. Out stepped a man, tall, composed, his overcoat cut clean, charcoal gray against the muted sidewalk, shoes polished, posture deliberate. His face didn't search the scene, it assessed it, like he already knew where he was, and more importantly, who he was. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, voice calm but laced with steel. The officers glanced at each other. Tiana's eyes didn't leave the man's face. "No problem, sir," the older one said quickly, authority returning to his voice like muscle memory. "Just checking on a report. Routine questioning." The man's gaze swept from the badge to the girl. He gave a slight nod to her, nothing dramatic, just enough for her to know he was here now. "I see," he said. "And what exactly is routine about detaining my daughter outside a bookstore?" The word daughter landed like thunder muffled under fine silk. The younger officer blinked. I'm Dr. Elijah Brooks," he said smoothly, extending a gloved hand that neither of them reached for. "President of Yale University. And I believe you've mistaken a scholarship recipient for a suspect." The air thickened. Not with sound, but with the absence of it. The crowd had grown, quiet and still. The woman filming zoomed in, slow and steady. The older cop shifted his stance, arms crossing. "We didn't detain anyone." She matched a description. "We were asking questions." "Did you ask anyone else on this street?" Dr. Brooks asked, voice low but unwavering. "Or was the Ivy League sweatshirt enough to raise suspicion?" "We were doing our jobs." "No," he said, the word flat and final. "You were feeding assumptions." Tiana watched it unfold. Watched the officers go from smug to stiff in seconds. Not from a threat. Not from yelling. But from something far harder to ignore. Presence. They weren't in charge anymore. And it wasn't just because of who he was. It was because he didn't have to say it twice. The younger officer opened his mouth, searching for a reset button that didn't exist. "We didn't mean anything by it." "You did," Dr. Brooks said. "And it's on camera now, which means it's not just my word you'll be answering to." He turned to Tiana. "Are you ready to go?" She nodded, slow, and the shift was complete. Not just in posture, but in power. They hadn't expected him, but they should have. Dr. Brooks didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words moved with the weight of someone who had spoken in boardrooms, classrooms, commencement halls, and always been heard. "My daughter stood here calmly," he said, gaze fixed on the older officer. "And you turned a sweatshirt into suspicion." The older cop opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. Like the script he'd been following had suddenly vanished. The younger one glanced again at the growing crowd, at the woman still filming with steady hands. "We didn't know who she was," the older one finally muttered. Dr. Brooks tilted his head just slightly. And if she had been someone else? If she hadn't had a Yale hoodie on? Or if I hadn't arrived? What would this have become? "It's not like that," the younger officer cut in. But the words fell flat under the weight of what everyone had seen. "She told you her name. She told you she was waiting. She gave you identification. And still you pressed, circled her, mocked her, called for backup. Over what?" His tone didn't rise, but the silence that followed made it louder. The crowd had shifted now. No longer just curious. They were listening. Really listening. Judging. Not the girl in the hoodie, but the men who had tried to shrink her beneath it. "She wasn't a threat," Dr. Brooks continued. "She was a child in the rain with a book in her hand, and your instincts didn't say protect. They said question. They said doubt." The older officer bristled. "Look, we follow protocol." "No," Dr. Brooks said, sharp but still composed. "You follow bias, and today that bias met its mirror." The younger one shuffled slightly, his eyes darting between cameras, boots scuffing against wet pavement. "We didn't mean any harm," he tried again. "But harm was done," Dr. Brooks said. You questioned her humanity before her identity, and that has consequences. He didn't need to threaten. He didn't need to explain who he was again. The title had already echoed. President of Yale University. But now it wasn't about title. It was about truth. Tiana remained silent. Not because she was afraid, but because this moment wasn't about fighting back. It was about being seen. The officers stood still. The crowd didn't clap. No one cheered. But the judgment in the air was palpable, sharp as cold wind. Because a badge doesn't carry as much power when it's weighed against dignity. And dignity when it stands still, when it doesn't yell, when it simply refuses to be erased. That's what people remember. Dr. Brooks looked at his daughter. Let's go. And just like that, they turned. Not running, not retreating, but walking away from the narrative that had tried, and failed, to contain them. The video hit social media that same night. No hashtags, no music. Just a shaky 5-minute clip of a teenage girl in a Yale hoodie standing still while 2 officers circled her like a puzzle they couldn't solve. Her voice calm, the questions sharp. Then, the car, the man, the shift. By morning it had gone viral. News outlets reached out. Some to Dr. Brooks, most to Tiana. They wanted statements, exclusives, reactions. Yale's PR office released a carefully worded response by noon. We stand behind our students, past, present, and future. We also stand for accountability. The officers were placed on administrative review by sunset. But Dr. Brooks didn't sit for interviews, didn't tweet, didn't write an op-ed. He knew silence, when chosen, can speak volumes. Tiana, however, said one thing. A local reporter caught her outside school 2 days later, voice recorder in hand, notebook poised. She didn't hide or dodge. She looked him straight in the eye and said, "I just wanted to buy a book." That was it, 6 words. But they landed like thunder. Because behind those words wasn't just innocence, it was indictment. Of the way assumptions unfold, of how ambition can be mistaken for audacity, of how a girl with a hoodie and a future could be turned into a threat before her story was even heard. The footage kept circling. Not for drama, but for reflection. Think pieces rolled out, profiling in plain sight, the weight of a hoodie, when presence becomes protest. But Tiana didn't read them. She returned to Whitmore Books 3 weeks later, alone, hoodie on, head high. The same clerk behind the counter recognized her immediately, but didn't say a word. He just nodded once. Respectfully. Near the front window stood a mannequin they never used, an old display from a forgotten college promo, but now it wore a navy hoodie, stitched with the white letters, YALE. A hand-lettered card sat beside it, not for sale, for remembrance. Tiana paused in front of it for a moment. Not because she needed validation, but because that display said what no press release could. We saw what happened, and we won't forget. A little girl, maybe 10, stood beside her. Eyes wide, staring at the hoodie like it was armor. "Did you really go there?" she asked. "Not yet," Tiana said, smiling. "But I will." And that was the difference. This wasn't a story about a moment anymore. It was a marker of who she was, of what tried to stop her, of what didn't. The rain had passed, the streets were dry now, but some things still left puddles. Reflections, memory, truth. The leaves had begun to change. Gold scattered the sidewalks like confetti that no one had thrown. Tiana Brooks walked the familiar path back to Whitmore Books, the same navy hoodie pulled over her curls, sleeves slightly longer than her wrists. It didn't hang the way it used to, not because it had changed, but because she had. She wasn't there to relive anything. She wasn't there to remind anyone of what had happened. She was there for the same reason as before, to buy a book. Inside, the air smelled like old pages and quiet thinking. The clerk gave her a small nod from behind the register. No questions, no whispers, just recognition, the respectful kind. The mannequin still stood in the window. Same hoodie, same handwritten card. Not for sale, for remembrance. This time, Tiana didn't stop to read it. She didn't need to. The words weren't for her anymore. They were for anyone who walked by and thought ambition needed permission. She wandered the aisles slowly, fingertips grazing spines, her backpack lighter today, just notebooks and a pencil pouch. No weight of suspicion, no eyes tracking her movement, just space. Halfway through the fiction section, she heard small footsteps, then a voice, soft but sure. "Excuse me?" She turned. A girl stood behind her, no older than 9, big eyes and bigger dreams. She pointed to the hoodie. "You go to Yale?" she asked. Tiana paused for a beat, then smiled. "I will," she said. The girl's face lit up. "That's where I want to go." "Then you should. But I'm not, you know." Tiana crouched a little until they were eye to eye. "Don't let anyone tell you where you don't belong," she said. "You decide that." The girl nodded, like she was storing the words somewhere safe. When Tiana stood again, the girl was already running back to her mom, pointing, excited. Not about the news story, not about the viral video, just about the possibility. Tiana made her way to the counter with a copy of The Fire next time. The clerk rang her up without a word, but as she turned to go, he said quietly, "We're glad you came back." She nodded once. "So am I." Outside, the air was crisp, her breath visible in the late fall chill. She pulled her hoodie tighter, not to hide, but to hold. Because now, when she wore it, it wasn't just about a school. It was about a truth that stood still when the world tried to twist it. A reminder that her presence was never the problem. It was the answer. And as she walked home, no one followed her. No one stopped her. She didn't blend in. She didn't have to.